Picture two houses, same style, same size, same year, built. Both of them have a dock, both of them have a screened porch where you can sit with coffee at 7 in the morning and watch the sun come up over open water. In the photographs, honestly, you could not tell them apart. One of them is on the Gulf Coast of Florida, and it costs the better part of $1 million, and the insurance alone runs $8,000 or $9,000 a year. The other one is in the middle of the state on a lake, and the typical home in that town is worth just over $200,000. Same view, same dock, same sunrise, roughly a quarter of the price. And the only meaningful difference between those two houses is what is in the water. One is salt, one is fresh. That is the whole video today. Because there is a thing Florida buyers do almost automatically without ever deciding to do it, and it costs them an enormous amount of money. They hear the word Florida and they picture the ocean. So they shop the coast, they get the coastal price, they get the coastal insurance bill, and they never once look at the middle of the state, where there are more than 7,000 lakes and a stretch of country locals have called lake country for 100 years. I'm going to show you 7 towns in that lake country where waterfront living is still shockingly cheap in 2026. Not cheap in 2019. Cheap right now, with current numbers on every single one, because the word still is the promise in the title, and I intend to actually pay it off. And I am going to give you the honest catch on every one of them too, because every one of these towns has a real reason it is cheap. And if I skip that part, I'm just selling you something. Let me name the villain first, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and it explains every number in this video. The villain is the coastal premium. It is the extra money you pay purely for the water being salty, and it comes in 2 parts. The first part is what you pay the seller. Beachfront is scarce, it is famous, and the whole world wants it, so the price on the sign carries a premium that has nothing to do with the house itself. Fine, that is just a market. The second part is the one that actually hurts, and it is what you pay every year afterward, forever. Saltwater brings hurricane exposure. Hurricane exposure brings windstorm coverage, and somewhere between 40 and 55% of a coastal Florida insurance premium is the cost of insuring against wind. That is why the same house can cost roughly 3 times as much to insure on the coast as it does 60 miles inland. Florida's average homeowner's premium is running around $8,400. In the inland central and north central counties, that same coverage frequently comes in under $2,000. Now here is the thing that should genuinely change how you shop. A lake does not do that. Freshwater inland does not carry windstorm reinsurance loading. It does not carry a beach premium. It does not carry a coastal insurance market that has been repricing itself for 4 straight years. A lake photographs exactly like the ocean from a back porch, and it prices like ordinary inland Florida. That gap between what the picture looks like and what the market charges for it is the single biggest piece of unclaimed value left in this state. And I want to be precise about the word still, because that is the actual claim in the title, and it is the one worth checking. This is not a story about how cheap Florida used to be. Over the past year, while the coastal markets did the repricing everyone has been reading about, Lake Country did something much quieter. It stayed flat or drifted slightly down, or ticked slightly up town by town. Nothing dramatic in either direction, which means the discount that existed a few years ago did not get competed away. It is still sitting there in the middle of the state, on water, right now, and every number I am about to give you is current rather than historical. 2 quick notes on my numbers so you can check me. Every town value I give you is the Zillow typical home value for that town, current as of the middle of this year. And be clear about what that is. It is the whole town, not the lakefront segment. Lakefront in these towns does carry a premium over the town median, exactly like it does everywhere. The point is not that a dock is free. The point is that the entire base you are building from is a fraction of the coast, so the lakefront premium is being applied to a $200,000 town instead of a $700,000 one. When you shop, filter for waterfront specifically and compare against Redfin's sold data, not asking prices. Now let me count them down from 7 to 1. Number 7 is Leesburg, up in Lake County, sitting on the Harris chain of lakes. The typical home here runs around $291,000, which makes it the most expensive town on this list and still well under the Florida typical value of about $392,000. What you get for that is the best of both worlds argument. The Harris Chain is a genuine connected chain of big lakes, so you can put a boat in and actually go somewhere, which most single lakes do not offer. And you are close enough to Orlando for a real airport and real hospitals. The catch is straightforward. This is the most discovered corner of lake country, and the prices around it prove it. Just up the road, Eustis runs about $334,000 and Tavares about $311,000, and pretty Mount Dora is up near $384,000. Leesburg is the value entry into an area that is no longer a secret. If you want lake country with amenities, start here, but know you are paying for the convenience. This is the right town for someone who wants the lake life without giving up a short drive to a major airport, and the wrong town for someone chasing the lowest possible number. Number 6 is Lake Placid down in Highlands County, and it calls itself the Town of Lakes for a reason. There are roughly 24 named lakes in and around it, including Lake June in winter, which is a genuinely deep, clear lake with real frontage, not a shallow pond with a fancy name. The typical home is around $261,000, so the trade here is obvious. Compared to Leesburg, you give up proximity to a major city, and in exchange, you get more water per person than almost anywhere in Florida. The catch is distance. This is a small town, and small town Florida means the nearest full-service hospital, the nearest big airport, and the nearest large specialty medical practice are all a drive. If you are in your 60s and healthy, that reads as peaceful. If you are in your 80s or managing a condition, that drive is not a small detail, and I would want you to measure it on a map before you fall in love with a listing. This is a town for the active early retiree who genuinely wants water and quiet, and a difficult one for anyone whose calendar is filling up with appointments. Number 5 is Okeechobee, sitting on the north rim of the biggest lake in the state, and this one requires me to be more careful than any other town on the list. The typical home is around $258,000. Lake Okeechobee is enormous, about 730 square miles, and it is the center of an entire fishing economy. But I have to give you 2 honest catches here, not one. First, the lake is ringed by a dike, so a lot of what gets marketed as lakefront in this area actually fronts a rim canal rather than open water, and those are very different things. Check exactly what your dock touches. Second, and more seriously, this lake has a recurring blue-green algae problem. State health officials issued a caution about blue-green algae on the lake this July, and in 2023, a bloom covered around 380 square miles, more than half the lake, growing past 440 square miles within weeks. These blooms can produce a toxin that health departments warn people and pets to stay out of the water for. They come and go by season and by year, and the state is spending heavily on the problem, but you are buying into a lake with a known water quality history, and you should buy with your eyes fully open. And if this is the kind of honest breakdown you actually want before spending your savings, do me a favor and tap the like button. It genuinely helps push this in front of the next person shopping, and that is the only reason I make these. Number 4 is Sebring, the county seat of Highlands and the practical center of lake country, sitting on Lake Jackson. The typical home here is about $241,000, and notably, that is down close to 2% over the past year, so this is not a market running away from you. Sebring gives you what Lake Placid does not, which is services. This is where the hospital is, where the shopping is, and where the downtown circle and the famous racetrack are. For most people watching, Sebring is the sensible pick in Highlands County. The catch here is liquidity, and it is a real one. There are more than 700 homes listed in Sebring right now, roughly double a year ago, and the typical home takes around 97 days to go under contract. That is a gift when you are buying, because you can negotiate hard and take your time. It is a problem if you ever need to sell in a hurry. Buy here planning to stay, not planning to flip. If you want one town on this list to start your search in, because it balances water price and a hospital you can actually reach, this is the one I would point you at first. And that is the question I want you carrying into the last few towns, because it is the real one. Cheap is easy to find. Cheap that you will still be happy with in 10 years is the hard part. The final 3 answer that, and number 1 answers it with the lowest number in this entire video. Number 3 is Babson Park in Polk County, sitting on Crooked Lake. And this is the one most people have never heard of. The typical home is around $230,000. Crooked Lake is one of the sandhill lakes along the Central Ridge, which means clear sand bottom water rather than the dark tannic water a lot of Florida lakes have. And if you have ever wondered why some Florida lake photos look tropical and others look like tea, that ridge geology is the answer. The catch is size and water level. Babson Park is genuinely tiny with very few services of its own, so you are driving to Lake Wales or Winter Haven for almost everything. And these ridge lakes are largely rain-fed rather than fed by rivers, so their levels rise and fall meaningfully across wet and dry years. A dock that sits perfectly in a wet year can end up looking at a lot more sand in a dry one. That is normal here, and locals accept it, but nobody puts it in a listing. And working out exactly this, which small Florida towns are genuinely worth buying into and which ones only look good in photographs, is the whole reason the Florida Buy and Avoid list for 2026 exists. It lays out 40 Florida towns, 20 to buy and 20 to avoid, in one place, with the costs and the catches already checked on everyone. The link is sitting in the description right below this video. If you want the full map before you commit anywhere, that is where it lives. Number 2 is Avon Park, back in Highlands County, and now the numbers get genuinely hard to believe. The typical home here is around $203,000. That is roughly half the Florida typical value, in a town with lakes inside the city limits. Avon Park has a small college and a nearby Air Force range, so unlike some very small towns, there's an actual local economy that is not purely retirement and agriculture. The catch is economic. Avon Park is one of the lower income towns in this part of the state, and that shows up in the way you would expect in the condition of some housing stock, in the retail on offer, and in neighborhood by neighborhood variation that is much sharper here than in a master planned community. This is a town where the specific street matters enormously. Do not buy anything here from photographs. Walk it twice at different times of day. But if you do that work, Avon Park is arguably the most house and the most water your money can buy anywhere in Florida right now. And the people who have figured that out are mostly people who are willing to drive down and look. And that brings us to number 1, Frostproof in Polk County, which has both the best town name in the state and the lowest number in this video. The typical home in Frostproof is just over $202,000. It sits between Lake Clinch and Reedy Lake, right on that same central ridge, so we are talking about the clear sand bottom kind of water, and it is a real, small, working Florida town rather than a resort invention. Let me put that number in the context that makes it land. The typical Florida home is worth about $392,000, so the typical Frostproof home is roughly half the state. And compare it to the coast properly. Down in Cape Coral, the typical home is around $337,000, and the average insurance premium there has been reported around $8,500 a year. In Frostproof, you are looking at a lower purchase price and an inland insurance profile on water you can still put a boat into. That difference does not show up as a one-time saving. It shows up every year for as long as you own the place. Now the catch, and it is the biggest one on the list, which is exactly why Frostproof is number 1 and not somewhere in the middle. This is a small town with limited services. Your nearest hospital, your nearest real grocery selection, and your nearest airport are all a drive, and it is not a 5-minute drive. Frostproof is cheap because almost nobody is competing to move there, and that is the honest reason, not a hidden gem story. If you need convenience, this is the wrong town, and I would rather tell you that now than have you find out after closing. But if you are the kind of person who genuinely wants quiet, who drives to town once a week and considers that a feature rather than a burden, and who would rather own outright on clear water than carry a mortgage on a coastal street, Frostproof is very close to the best deal in the state of Florida, and it is not particularly close. Now let me give you the caveat that applies to all 7, because it matters more than any single town. Inland does not mean risk-free, and anyone who tells you otherwise has not been paying attention. Hurricanes do not stop at the coastline. They come inland as enormous rain events, and Central Florida has taken serious inland flooding from storms that made landfall on the coast. Lakes rise, low-lying property near them floods. So for every single one of these towns, you need to pull the federal flood maps for the exact address, not the town, and get a flood insurance quote before you make an offer, because a standard homeowner's policy does not cover rising water. Being inland saves you an enormous amount on wind. It does not automatically save you on flood, and the difference between a lot that sits 10 feet above the water and one that sits 2 feet above it is the entire ballgame. So here is how I would actually use this list. Lake country is the best remaining value in Florida because the market prices salt water and it does not price fresh water, and that is a genuine inefficiency you can act on today. But cheap always has a reason, and in these 7 towns, the reasons are consistent and knowable. Distance from a hospital, distance from an airport, a thin local economy, a lake with a water quality history, a market so slow that selling takes months. None of those are deal breakers. Every one of them is a deal breaker for somebody. So do the 3 checks before you fall in love with any listing. Measure the actual drive to the nearest full-service hospital. Pull the flood map and get a real flood quote for that exact lot. And look up the water quality history of that specific lake, not the region, because 2 lakes 30 miles apart can be completely different bodies of water. Do those 3 things and you are buying with your eyes open, which is the only way any of this works. So here is my question for you, and I read every one of these. If you already live on a Florida lake, tell me which lake and what you actually paid. And just as importantly, tell me the thing you did not expect. The water level, the bugs, the drive, whatever it turned out to be. There are people watching this right now who are seriously considering exactly your town, and 30 seconds from you is worth more than anything I can put on a chart. And if this was useful, the video you want next is the one on why Florida homes cost so much to own, because it takes apart the exact cost stack these lake towns let you skip. And once you see it laid out, you will understand precisely why that Gulf Coast house costs 4 times as much for the same sunrise. Go watch that one next. And subscribe to FloridaPulse, because I go through these town-level numbers every month, and Lake Country is moving quietly enough that most people will not notice until it has already repriced. We will see you in the next one.